Greetings, Jeepers. So the snow is starting to fly here in Canada, and our project for the winter is we're going to work on the knuckles and the leaf springs. What we got an issue is we don't have the proper leaf springs in this 47. We need 8 leaves, and there's only 5 leaves there, and the knuckles look well used, and we haven't had a drop of grease in there for a long time, so we're gonna tear that apart, replace the knuckles, and get that working. And that's kind of our project for the winter here. So stay tuned, there's gonna be a bunch of videos coming out. So what we're gonna start with is we're gonna take off the tie rods. You've seen we've replaced the whole thing, so we're gonna spin all these off. And once we got the tie rods released, we'll take the shock off and then continue into wherever it takes us, the leaves or the knuckles.
The first step, we're gonna take all these cotter pins out. So we're just gonna bend them back and just pull them out. This might be not as easy as you think. Cotter pins are kind of hard to get in and out. We'll just pull all 4 of the cotter pins out on the tie rod.
So at the end of the day here, we had issue with this cotter pin, so we just grind it off and just comes out like a dam. Once you grind it, tip off and you're done.
Now number 3 and number 4 to go.
Once you cut them at the end, you just yank them out with not any problem.
Unloosen all your nuts on your tie bars. We got it all unloosened now. Now we'll just take them off. Now we are going to break the lugs on the tires so we can get the tires off, so we can continue on with getting these knuckles apart. And then we can get the shock off. With the Jeep now jacked up, getting the tire off.
That should do it. Voila. One tire.
Next, we take the cotter pins off the shocks. We'll get both cotter pins off, and the shock will just slide right off.
Unbelievable. That easy. Normally it's harder than that, but that went very smoothly. So once you take the cotter pin out, these shock washers just fall off essentially on the top and the bottom. And then just give your shock a good pull. It comes off the top and it just slides off the bottom quite nicely. If you watch other videos we had, these are replacements, so it comes off quite easily.
With the shock off and their tie bars, now we have to get our drive shaft off because it's connected to our axle. And when we take off these leaf springs, the whole axle is going to drop out. So we have to just unloosen the 4 nuts on our little U-bolts right here. And you can watch another video of how I install this front drive shaft. So loosen these and get this off. Use a 1/2-inch wrench to break your nuts. And now we're just unloosen all of them, the nut and the lock washer. Make sure you put all this stuff in a spot to remember for when you put this back together. Disengage your front drive shaft from your front axle. We'll just put back our U-bolts into our axle. We don't lose everything. And it's in this nice safe spot to remember where it is when we put this all back together. And now we're moving on to the knuckles and the leaf springs. Also make sure you take off your brake line in the front here coming from your master cylinder. So you don't want to rip your brake lines apart. So just loosen it. To get our brake line off, we have to pop off this bracket that holds our brake line on. We'll pop this off, and then we can unscrew our flex line for the front to our main brake line in the front here. Using your long screwdriver, we'll pound this off, and now it'll just pop right off. And now we can unloosen this part of our brake line. Now with your main brake line not loosened here, we can unloosen it using a wrench. We'll loosen it. And mine's already pretty much hand loosened already. Use the wrench already. And now just split it apart. And now we can disconnect our flex line from our front axle down there. And now we're down here at the front axle. And now your flex line, brake line in the front will just twist right off. There you go. Some brake fluid might drain out. Just make sure to use that washer that fell on the ground right there. And we'll put this in a safe spot for me to put this all together. We're now starting on the leaf springs, getting them kind of loosened up. But in our situation, we have two nuts. We have a nut, lock washer and our nut. So we're just going to loosen the first nut on both sides first. And then we'll actually support the Jeep on the frame here before we actually drop our leaf springs out. Because the whole front axle is going to fall right off. Get it properly supported, but we're getting this kind of prepped first. So now we're on to our second nut, not going off slowly. So our top nut is in metric and our bottom nut is imperial, so something's really messed up here. I'm hoping to get these nuts off. We're off to cut the whole U-bolt right off.
So yeah, I sheared that one right off. We got all kinds of imperial metric going on these U-bolts. So we'll have to make sure we get it all back together as was.
Oh, and there it is. Now we're trying to break the bolts on our leaf springs because we want to make sure we get this all loose before we take the whole thing apart. And we have the tire on that's a bit more supported. Now on the driver's side, we have to repeat the same step as we did on the passenger side. So we have to take off our shock from the frame and the leaf spring, and then take off our tie bar as well. Get that loosened up, take the tire off, and then we can continue.
So now we're just going to lift the Jeep up and put it on some blocks so it's supported on the frame here. We'll take the tire off, and that should give us good access to the other side before the axle just falls out of the 47. So what we want to do here next is make sure we got our tie rods released from the knuckles. So you just need a tie rod, a fork, and you just place it in here between the knuckle and the tie rod, and we'll pound on it and should release it.
After pounding on it with your fork, your tie bar end will just fall out of your knuckle, and now we can continue. We'll just give it a tap down and it comes right off. Now we're lifting up the Jeep so we can put the frame onto these jack stands back here so we can get the axle and these leaf springs off. Now we're gonna pull our supports underneath from our axle so we can get it onto our frame supports on both sides. Do the same thing on this side as well. So we're gonna slowly drop it down and it should just go right onto the frame under supports. We're going to loosen both the sides here, and then we're going to try to take off one side and see what happens. We're going to pound this. This one's going to come out easy. So we're going to use a punch and just punch this thing out. Stand back here and see what's going to happen. Now we're trying to take the top bolt off or shackle here so we can get our punches out hopefully. We got the two shackles to drop from our leaf spring, and now we're gonna go the other side. Now we're trying to loosen the shackle right here at the very bottom to release our leaf spring from the frame. On this side, we're gonna try and loosen both of these bolts at the same time, and then hopefully the leaf spring will just drop right out. So we're getting the top one unloosened. Dropped out. The next step is we have to remove the pivot eye bolt at the back of our leaf spring so we can drop out our leaf spring and release it from the frame. We'll do it on this side with, take off the cotter pin first, and then we'll just take out this bolt and do the same thing on the driver's side as well. And now we'll get this underway. Once you got your cotter pin unbent, we can now pull out our cotter pin from our pivot eye bolt, and we'll repeat the same step on the driver's side. And now we can unloosen our pivot eye bolt from our leaf spring. Now we'll just unloosen the back nut on our bolt here, and it'll just come right off as so. And now we can just tap our bolt from this side and it should just pop right out.
And out it comes.
Now on the driver's side, we'll do the same step as we did on the passenger side. We'll have to take out our cotter pin, unloosen our nut, and pull out our pivot eye bolt, and then that will release this side of our leaf spring. So we're now going to jack the front of the Jeep up so we can maybe release the leaf springs from the frame. We're working on releasing the leaf spring from the axle in the front here. And first we have to loosen all the bolts on our U-bolts here, down here. We'll loosen those and our leaf spring will just drop out because we have the Jeep supported right on the frame over there. So we got the axle completely off now, but we have to block up on the diff side because it wants to roll. There. And there we go. So the axle is now free from the leaf springs and from the Jeep. We have the Jeep lifted right here on these blocks on the frame, but we have to get it to lift back here on these jacks so we can just pull out the axle forward like that and pull it right out. And we're on. Brute force. And there it is. The leaf spring is out.